Greetings, everyone. Welcome to EDL700, Creating Professional Learning Communities. I'm Nelson Coulter, and I'm the lead learner with you all on this journey this term. As it turns out, there's actually two sections of this course going on at the same time, the other one being taught by Tracy Johnson. So I guess one way that you all can view this is that you lost the flip and ended up with me. Tracy is certainly a lot smarter than I am. She knows a lot more about it than I do. That said, I want you to know up front that it is my intention to do everything within my power to infect your thinking during this term. As you can tell by looking at me and my nice haircut, I got a little age on me, and my shelf life is somewhat limited, but I'm committed to using what years I do have remaining to try to create the most positive impact I can and the best futures I can for all the thousands of students that you all will be serving long after the worms have gotten me. You've already been exposed to the syllabus and the fact that there is no textbook, and several of you have thanked me for that. You're welcome. I was most pleased when Dr. Russ Perry brought me onto the team last August, and one of the first conversations we had was whether or not I would be required to force you all to buy and read a textbook, and he said, no, do it the way you want to do it. And so consequently, the course is structured, as you're beginning to find out, completely on open source documents and or presentation formats of some other medium. The thing that I've tried to do on that on the course design is to expose you to some of the most prominent thought leaders in our profession, as well as a fair number of folks like yourself and like myself that maybe not so famous, but are doing high quality work and have some excellent thoughts about how we can do our work better. Several of you have already found the Sandbox Forum that appears, that's appearing right now in Module 1. I will drag that thing each week into the next week's module, and that's the question and answer lab, if you want to. And some of you have already begun to play in the sandbox. You've asked questions, and occasionally I get there first and answer a question, but several times others in the class know the answer and answer the question. So yes, this is collective wisdom on our part. Feel free to answer the questions if you know the answer, and feel free to ask questions if you have them. Generally, when I was trying to design the courses, you all know we are on 7-week terms, and I suspect that was a large factor in the reason that you chose LSUS. In course design, I've taught courses in purely face-to-face formats. I've taught courses in blended format, and I've also taught courses in purely online, both synchronous and synchronous. The short terms, and I've taught in shorter terms, and I've also taught in long terms, but the short terms really forced me to try to compact and sift some of the best information and content that I can to try to put in front of you, mostly to generate your deepest thinking in the shortest period of time that we have together. Mostly, my goal in the course design is to see if I can expose you to a learning task. As the Lakefield Selecta used to say, the most important task of a teacher is to design engaging learning tasks. So I've tried to design engaging learning tasks with this end in mind. I would like to get your focused attention for 5 to 7 hours a week, and that was my goal. As you can see already in week 1, you have 6 learning tasks that are put before you, and generally this is the way they're going to flow. Learning task 1, 2, 3, and 4 is going to be content that I'm feeding to you, and you're providing the feedback to me in those Google Forms. And most weeks, the content on learning task 1 is going to be a document of some kind, and most of the time, learning task 2 will be a video of some kind. Most of the time, learning task 3 will be some sort of a presentation, and most of the time, learning task 4 will be a podcast. All that's not set in stone, but that was what I've been looking for and trying to keep it fairly well structured for you so you know what's coming. Learning Task 5 is where I'm asking you to go out and hunt and peck and find some good content in your, as a result of your discerning minds that is well aligned to the weekly theme. And I'll touch on those themes in a few minutes. And then finally, Learning Task 6 is the weekly discussion forums, in which I'll pose 2 or 3 prompts per week for you. Obviously, in week 1, it's mostly about introductions and getting to know each other. But in subsequent weeks, I'll be posing some things that I hope will generate a little more student-to-student interaction and allow you and I to ping each other's brains and dig a little deeper with each other. Here's the good news. Week 1 looks just like I described it. Week 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 will look exactly the same. The theme that we're working around will change from week to week, but that structure will remain exactly the same. So I know that most of you are neck deep in very consuming jobs, and there's no surprises coming from me. You'll know the structure exactly from beginning to end, and yes, the structure remains the same for week 7. Sorry. And week 7 we'll have a final exam, but don't get too tense about that. The final exam, I'll be giving you those prompts in the exact language, probably in week 3 or week 4. You'll know what's coming on the final exam before it. Well, you already know if you read the syllabus. All the submissions are in Google Forms, other than the discussion forums, and this is why. As in most classrooms, and in your classrooms, it doesn't matter whether you're teaching pre-K or 4th grade or junior English or college chemistry. As much high quality learning occurs on student to student interaction as ever as a result of what the instructor puts out there. So as you all are responding to those prompts in those Google Forms each week, I don't know if any of you have ever used Google Forms, but what I see on the backside is all of your responses put into a spreadsheet format. And after the week closes, you will find in the Learning Enhancement section of the next week a link to which you can look in and see all the responses of your fellow students in this course for the last week's prompts. And in fact, some of the discussion items that I will pose to you in subsequent weeks will be directly related to what you see in your fellow students' responses from the prior week. Let me see. Zoom sessions, or those of you that have me before know this, this is not a lecture from me, so there's no need for you to bust out your laptop or your iPad or your pen and pencil. This is mostly, I'm going to share a few thoughts with you as they've come to my mind when I'm working through and grading and looking at your responses, and also any thoughts I might have in relation to the weekly theme. But it's not going to be a lecture, and it's mostly just me delivering a few thoughts and comments and then opening the floor for you to ask questions. And those questions can be about this course, about the content of the week. Those questions can be about problems of practice that you're currently dealing with, or problems of practice that you think you might anticipate as you move into ever more levels of responsibility in school leadership. Or I don't care, you can ask me personal questions if you want to. I'll answer almost anything. As you have seen from looking through the syllabus, I've chosen to frame the 7 weeks around the metaphors of leadership. Professional learning communities, over the years I've heard a lot of people talk about we're doing professional learning communities, or we have a professional learning community, and I tend to think of it much more in terms of a verb instead of nouns. Professional learning communities is something we are. The only question is to what degree of integrity and efficacy are we engaging in those communal activities. So what I'm trying to do in this course with you all, I can promise you it looks different in the way that Tracy Johnson is delivering the other section, but you got what you got. But I want for you and I to think week by week is about the professional learning communities in relation to what is our responsibility as leaders in that school setting. What does that professional learning community need from us in order to be the most efficient and the most effective tool possible in the interest of creating better futures for the children that we touch? So consequently, week one, I use the metaphor of the PLC leader as architect. Week two, it'll shift to PLC leader as servant leader. Week three, we'll move to thinking of ourselves and the PLC leaders as communicators. And then week four, psychologists. Week five, culture crafters. Week six as coaches. And then finally, week seven as wangateurs. No, I'm not going to tell you what it means. Let's talk week one. You've already seen some content. Some of you have seen most of the content, but the document is from the Osceola School in Florida, a school district in Florida, which is a PLC guidebook. Very technical and structured document. It's got a lot of meat and potatoes stuff for those of you that are OCD and want to know, times, dates, how wide the margins need to be and that kind of stuff. You'll love it. For those of you that are a little more global thinkers, you'll hate it on purpose. The video you see is Becky DeFore. Becky and her husband, Rick, and Robert Aker have, over the last 20 years, probably been the premier thought leaders in the conceptualization and articulation of this whole concept of professional learning communities. Anything you read or watch that comes from Rick or Becky DeFore is good stuff, and it's directly tied to professional learning communities, and it will benefit you and your campus if you consume whatever their thinking is. The third item this week, Learning Task 3, is a PowerPoint, and some of you have already gotten some heartburn on how to do the API citation for that PowerPoint. By the way, some of those documents I feed you will be, some of the stuff I feed you, they'll actually have a link on that page and say, here's the APA citation, click here, and they'll give it to you. Some of it you got to dig and scratch a little bit, and I'm sure I'll get questions about APA citation in a minute when I open the floor. And then the final piece of content that I pitched at you this week in Learning Task 4 was the podcast interview from Teacher Magazine of Dr. Lawrence Ingvarsson on the topic of professional learning communities and his thoughts in that regard. Here's the thing. Servant leadership. You and I have such a short window of time to impact the lives of children. And most of you, there's no question in my mind, have done a remarkable job of impacting the lives of somewhere between 10 and 25 children every year, probably. Those of you that work in high schools, maybe you're even teaching 150 students a day. But as you think about moving into leadership roles and levels of more responsibility, suddenly your influence now goes from that classroom window of 15 to 150 children per year to potentially thousands of students per year. Some of my friends are superintendents in school districts that serve 100,000 students or more. And you think about that, it gives you and I a great opportunity to touch the future. And I would argue that we need not do it without putting some very careful thought and consideration into the kinds of things we think, the kinds of things we say, the kinds of things that we do to try to engage and pull other people into this worthy work with us. One of the most important things I believe that you and I can do is if we want to be successful in this process, and particularly in the process of leading professional learning communities, I'm convinced of this, that, let me say down, I'm going to slow down and say this very slowly. Trust is the precursor of followership. Let me say it again. Trust is the precursor of followership. Already in the way I've begun to engage you this evening, and also the way I've engaged with you all, those of you that have reached out to me by phone or by email, I've been using very deliberate processes and methodologies to try to engender between you and me a level of trust. And that was done with the malicious intent of opening your mind to the possibility of fully considering the things I say and offer to you as ways of changing your habits, your daily habits, in regard to being servant leaders. I'll say this on one more little sermon piece here, and then I'm going to open the floor for questions. If you reach out to me, I think you've already discovered that you'll get a response from me quickly. I am, as a school leader, well, I'll give you an example. The largest campus I was ever a principal of, I had 9 assistant principals. And I hammered away with those people, as I have with all my other mentees. But this is critical. If you and I cannot model what it is we want from those that work with us, then we can't demand it. And so I believe it's critical that you and I, as leaders, as servant leaders, be very responsive to the customers that reach out to us, respond quickly, in the most very straightforward way, not evasive, and we always practice high levels of transparency. And you'll hear more about me in my blatherings from time to time, or if you stick your nose in my blog, if you've got that much extra time on your hand, you can read that stuff. So I'm gonna wind my blathering down, and if you have questions or comments, you can put them in the chat box. Those of you that have had me before know that my hearing is not that great, so I may have to ask you, if you ask me a question audio version, it's possible I may have to ask you to repeat. I've known for about 15 years that I needed a hearing aid, and my lovely wife would ask me from time to time why I didn't get hearing aids. And at the time she started that, I was a high school principal, and I told her I don't need to hear all that stuff that's going on and being said. So I still haven't gotten around to getting the hearing aids. But if you have questions for me now about this course, about the content, about problems of practice, or if you got personal questions, most of those I'll ask. I'm probably not going to talk about my sex life, but virtually anything else I'll talk to you about. Floor is open. I'm going to click off of my notes, and if you want to put something in the chat box, you can. I told the group that I had last term. I'm sorry. I feel like I may be shorting you a little bit by not giving you lectures every week, but after talking to the class I had back in December, they assured me it was fine by them if I didn't give them a formal lecture every week. So how would you cite that PowerPoint, Dana? Okay, I'll tell you. If I were citing that PowerPoint, I would be looking through those 58 slides and trying to find some indication of who the author was. As you know, the appropriate APA citation formula goes like from your left to right. It goes, who is the author of the content, not who gave you the content. I've had several students try to give me credit for a lot of work over the last year that I didn't do. It's the author or the creator of the content. The year, the when, is the very next thing in that formula. What year was it created? The next thing in that formula was the title, is the title, the what. What is this document or this presentation or this video? And then the last part of it is where. Where can that thing be found by someone else that wants to research that document, that video, that podcast, or whatever? So you go the who, the when, the what, and then the where to find it. And so that's the secret. So to answer Dana's question, I would be looking I would be searching for anything in that document that would give me some indication of where it came from, or who generated it, And usually you can find telltale signs. That particular PowerPoint that Dana's citing, I think that's 1.3, isn't it? Is it 1.3? Yeah, 1.3. And sometimes you'll get some of those. The author doesn't put their name at the front of it. That particular document was created by a person named Horton, Horton. But what you can do, if you can't find the specific citation, find something like a title of that thing and then Google search it, and it'll probably take you to the source of where that document is. Some of you have already done that. Some of you have already found it. And when I share with you next week your collective responses to Learning Task 1.3, you'll see that a number of you were able to identify and find the exact appropriate APA citation for that. Let me add this too on the topic of APA citations as well. There's a whole manual on that, the 6th editions of the American Psychological Association style book, and most universities force you to buy that, but I don't know why, because you can find it all online. But for most of these documents, not most of them, for many of these documents, there's actually more than one acceptable version of the APA citation. But the main thing I'm looking for is that fourfold formula, because if I'm sharing a piece of content with you, or if you're sharing a piece of content with someone else, or if you're sharing it with your professional learning community, you want people to be able to go and find that document for themselves, or if they want to buy the book or download the article or whatever, you want to make it as easy as possible for them to do that as you can. So a number of documents and presentations, there's actually more than one allowable and acceptable APA citation, but they never vary from that fourfold formula that I've shared with you. Other questions you got? On Wednesday night after a work day. The children in the other room. Going once, going twice. Okay. After tonight's session, you're being recorded. So all of you that have, like myself, you went and got a special haircut for the evening's film. This is being recorded, and I will probably won't happen till in the morning, but I've got another class after this one. But what I'll do is upload it and put it in the learning enhancement section of your weekly module. So you can go back and take a look at it if you want to. It's your call. Obviously, you're not going to be tested on any of this stuff. I guess I should say, as a matter of appreciation, I'm not in my office here. Right before we began the session this evening, I had the great blessing of witnessing the baptism of one of my granddaughters who lives in another town, and my son-in-law, who's a principal at this school where I'm standing, allowed me to use his office to beam tonight's session to you. So I'm thankful to Jody Dr. Reel for letting me do that. Are there minimal responses to our answers on the Google form questions? Michelle, yeah, I get a lot of minimal responses. I don't appreciate them all that much. Here's the thing about teaching and learning the conclusion I've come to. I am way past me taking stuff and deciding what's important, and then telling you what I think is important, and then me making you tell me back what I think is important. I'm a believer in the constructivist theory of learning, and that each of us come to knowledge and come to the understanding of how that knowledge is applicable to ourselves in our own way, in our own time, and in the context of our own experiences. And so what I try to do is put provocative content in front of you that forces you to think, and I try to give you some questions that design some learning prompts that are not designed for you to tell me what I want to hear, but for you to tell me what you've learned from that content that you think is useful. And then I ask you, as you know, questions about, okay, now how do you think you're going to use this? And so when I'm reading your responses, I'm trying to see if I'm getting your, this is like an occult art, I guess. I'm trying to see if I'm getting your best thinking and if I'm getting your full attention with the stuff. If you respond, for instance, I say, what are your biggest 3 takeaways? And you give me 3 takeaways and not any of them are more than 3 words long. It makes me question whether or not you really engage the content in a very thoughtful way or not. So I'm not looking for dissertations. I'm not looking for long paragraphs. What I am looking for is evidence that I've got some good thinking and some deep thinking going on your part. And particularly, when I'm reading your responses, I'm asking myself this question. Could he or she have given me that answer and never taken a look or listened to that content? Because if those kinds of superficial and non-substantive answers are coming at me, it makes me think that you're just playing a game with me. And just like when you were in kindergarten, and just like when you were in 5th grade, and just like when you were a sophomore, and just like when you were in your junior year of college, you get out of this experience what you put into it. I've tried mightily to design it in a way that forces you to think critically and deeply and futuristically about how to use the content. But some of you can do the game, play the game, and I know you bamboozle me, but I'm going to sleep okay anyway. If I can get you to think about it deeply, it'll make your life as a school leader far easier. It's never going to be easy, but it'll be easier. Thanks for the question, though, Michelle. Any other questions?
Dr. Coulter.
Yes, sir.
My question is, I'm working on your learning task 1.1.
Yeah.
And the last part of it, well, next to last, it says, as a lead learner, what powerful question could you ask to generate impactful PLC dialogue around this topic? Is that what's the word I'm trying to think? You want us to give you an example of some questions, or is it pertaining just to that particular assignment that you want us to look at?
Thanks for the question. I can't, my window, I can't see your name. Tell me your name.
DeMarcus.
DeMarcus, thanks for the question. A good question. I designed that learning prompt with this in mind. As a leader of a campus or leader of a PLC, and some of you are already in that role, whenever I'm consuming content, and as you can tell, it really doesn't matter whether it's fiction or nonfiction, or whether it's related to education or not related. I'm always thinking, is there some way I can use this content with my team and cause them deeper thinking and us higher levels of performance? So that prompt is designed to do this with you. What does DeMarcus see in that? And if you think of yourself as being a PLC leader, a leader of a group of really smart, engaged people, is there some question that I ask in relation to that content that would cause some pretty deep dialogue with my team about how we can get better at what we do? That's my goal. And I know that I'll get some pretty superficial questions about that too. But when you get the chance to look at everybody's responses, I think you'll see some different perspectives. And certainly people with there's a lot of bright minds in this class. There's 45 of you in this class. And I guess Tracy's got at least that many on there. So we got a lot of smart people chewing around on this PLC stuff this term. But I think you'll appreciate the contributions of your fellow students when you get to look at those things. Thanks for the question.
Okay,
Anybody else? I know several of you are probably taking EDL700, and I've got that class here in about 30 minutes. You're going to hear quite a bit of the same stuff as you hear in this one. I know some of you are taking 6 hours, and some of you even taking 7. You're also doing an internship on top of that. And welcome to my world. It's not one where sleep arrives very often or very deeply or very consistently. But I admire you for your gumption. It'll be a fast 7 weeks for those of you that are taking 7 hours. It's an ass kicker if you do that, I promise you. Other questions? Okay, I will record this. I mean, I'll store this and put it in your learning enhancements for future reference if you want. I think most of you that have emailed me or sent me messages or realize, or if you've had me in other classes, you know that I'm very responsive. I'll get back to you quickly if you reach out to me. Dana asks or makes a comment, 7 weeks leading straight up to LEAP testing. Yeah, is that supposed to be encouraging? Good night, all.